Now I think I've gotten all the parts off the motor I need to actually do the repair to it. So what you want to do is get rid of the old gasket off the intake. And right there is the original part number. If you're careful, you might be able to get it off in one piece. I don't usually get them off, paper gaskets off in one piece, but if you can, you know, that's going to make your job a lot easier. So, and there's also these little slots here. If you look carefully, you kind of have to work that out of there, so you're not just ripping it off of there. You got to get that out the right way. There's also a gasket right here that needs to be removed, and back here as well. So loads and loads of points for this engine to lose. So no wonder we were getting to deal with that. Then you're left here with your coolant passages. And man, do mine ever look grimy. So anyway, I'm not going to video the cleanup process. You know, it's going to be a pain in the butt and take a lot of time. I'm not going to work on processing all that video and stuff. You know, just use whatever method works for you. These are aluminum parts and stuff, so you want to make sure not to use a wire brush. Use, well, I mean, if you use a wire brush, use a brass one, not a steel one. So anyway, I'm going to get on to getting all that done, and well, it'll probably be tomorrow before I shoot any more video, but not for you guys that are watching. So anyway, I'll get this cleaned up, and I'll bring you back for the reassembly portion, or anything else interesting I find. Okay, so I went ahead and JB welded that piece on really well. If you're having to take that off the fuel rail, the fuel pressure sensor there in that fitting, make sure when you put it back that you use a little bit of grease or oil on the O-ring when you slide it back in there, so that you don't damage the O-ring. But as you can see, I've coated this thing super well, so hopefully it'll stay together. And so tomorrow I'll clean up my fuel injectors and the rest of the components. I would have got more done today, but it's just been so blame windy, I couldn't have the hood up on my car without risk of it being flopped up. And my head's been killing me. So anyway, let's see what happens tomorrow. Alright, so here's some of that gunk in a water passage. It's just... So here's some of that gunk that I'm going to be cleaning up out of the lower intake manifold. First pass, I'm just going to use a small pressure washer there. And it's like 2800 psi. Try and clean most of this gunk off of this thing, and then soak it in some detergent, and then spray it again. Also, before soaking anything in any detergents or chemicals, always remove all your sensors. Okay, so it's time to clean up the engine, my favorite part. But anyway, you'll see here that I've laid some rags in a box down in the engine valley to keep debris from falling down in there, and I've also taken paper towels and stuffed them down the intake ports of the heads to prevent material from going down in there. There's several ways that you can do this, you know. I'm doing it my way. So if you know of a better way, or you prefer to do it your way, you know, the comment sections to help other people. So feel free to voice that you do it this way or that way. But this is the way I'm doing it. If you don't like it, don't complain about it. Just state a way that you think it's better to clean up this kind of mess. So anyway, the object here is just get this cleaned back up to where you can reseal it. It doesn't have to be perfect like I was trying to get done with the other aluminum parts. So what I try to do is clean off all the material around where the timing cover gasket goes. First we'll take a knife and try and remove the rest of the gasket itself before going at it with the wire brush. But on this part, don't skimp out or get lazy, because this is where how good your seals really matter are going to be. Because if you don't get them on there nice and clean, then you might wind up with the water leaking the oil, or oil in the water. Right here, you want to get what's left of the rubber seal off of this. Let's go ahead and attach the water pump back to the front timing cover. So here's the gasket. Make sure it's laid out there right. If not, you'll be sorry. Line up your water pump with it. Right now I'm just going to put the 8mm bolts back in the water pump, just like this time. For now, I'm just putting the 8mm bolts that bolt the pump to the actual front cover, and I'm not going to tighten them down too awful tight or any of that. And feel free, to pay attention to what I'm doing here, because you'll care about where these bolts really go. So this will also show you where all those little 8mm go. Oh, and there's one more that goes right there. So there's 5 8mm bolts that go into that water pump. There we go. And then for the front main seal, or wear sleeve, whatever you want to call this, try to do this as evenly as possible. And hammer your seal. Might be a little tough at first, but you'll get it. Make sure not to hit it with like another piece of metal, like just sit here and bang on it with the hammer. You'll just spin the crap out of it.
What you trying to do?
Put it in the front sill. Then just make sure that you don't have any gaps between the outer rim and the cover. I'm going to tap it again just to make sure. And I'm also going to put the crank position sensor back on as well. And thankfully, the way that Ford has designed these, you can't foul this up. It's only going to go in there and set one way, one position, one distance. There's no trying to make sure that you get it right or any of that kind of stuff, and checking the gaps on it, like say on a SHO Taurus. And there we go. We got this assembled, and we can set this aside until it's time to put back in the car.
Looks nice and shiny.
And then we'll go ahead and put brand new auto lock spark plugs here in this car. Because you're not going to change these spark plugs with the intake on the car, so use the old-fashioned Motorcraft Platinum. Thankfully, these plugs weren't like seized in there or anything crazy. I've had difficult times getting plugs out of vehicles all my life. This is one of the easier ones. So far, all the plugs look like that right there. Nice and dry, look like they're supposed to. So anyway, that's what I'm putting in this thing right here. Is the Auto Lot Platinum. And I mean, NASCAR uses them, so they should be good enough for everybody, right? I hate NASCAR. Some kind of super gorilla strength to get these spark plugs back in there, so just be careful you don't set yourself up for a massive headache later by over tightening them. Got the new plugs installed in the back. At this point I only actually have 4 of them because that's all Rock Auto had, so there's 2 of them I'm not going to replace right now until I place another order with them, and then I'll get these other 2 plugs replaced. Okay, here I've got the upper and lower intake manifolds all cleaned up. Something that I did do that I didn't do on camera was I removed the throttle body assembly and removed the throttle position sensor right here that was held on by the two Phillips head screws. And to get that off of the upper intake manifold here, there was a let's see, there was 3 8mm bolts and one that was a standoff with an 8mm nut on it. And then to get the whole stud out, I think it was a 9 or 10mm nut, but I just used a pair of vice grips to get that off. But what I did is I let this soak in a plastic tub with you know, some of that Ming Green or concrete cleaner. Did a remarkable job at cleaning this out. I'm not going to keep trying any further. I mean, the rest of the car is not clean, you know, been cleaned, so it left some kind of like ugly residue crap. I'm gonna scrape all that off. It's probably some kind of oil film or something or another. And I think I'm just going to take some black looking paint and spray paint this sucker. And now this was really bad to start with, and it's not that great, and it didn't get to soak like the upper one did. But now the bottom of it, it got almost all the glazing off. There was some that did not come off, and I just left it on there. I just don't care anymore. So, I mean, the engine over here, you know, this isn't perfectly clean or anything, so I'm just not going to overstress the matter of having to, you know, clean this stuff and clean and clean and clean and clean and clean. So anyway, I'm going to oh yeah, another thing that I took off was the thermostat. I forgot to do that earlier. There's the housing cleaned up. I'd also taken the wire brush to all the nozzles or barbs that the hoses go onto and clean the crud off of those, so that they're in as good a shape as possible. Over here for the timing cover, I had to spend quite a bit of time to try and clean this up, and it was definitely heavily pitted and all, but it got over it, and it's clean and good as new, so I don't have any reservations about putting all this back together. So what I'm going to do is clean up the bottom of the engine where the oil pan gasket was. As you can see, that's still off there. I'm going to clean all that up so I can put the oil pan back on it too. And then I'll work on assembling the top end. Check out this interesting chemical reaction that's going on when you mix idiot spray with super clean concrete cleaner. I hope this looks like in the camera like it does to me here. I mean, here, watch. Yeah, now you can see those little dots, like, I don't even know what the word for that is. Man, some planes are getting it too. You guys ever see anything like that? It's probably poisoning me. I really hope you can see this on the camera like I can in real life. I mean, if I tilt it, it's still doing it. And the other thing you'll want to you want to install these other little rubber gaskets. That you'll notice that there's some little legs or whatever sticking out there, and there's some holes right there, so they just go and fit. You'll notice on the other side, for the other one, there isn't any of those, so you just fit it on right there. And then this one, you just put it on like this right here. And when you go to put your regular flat gaskets on here, you make sure that the blue striped line is facing you. It's just like when you do a head gasket. You just put it on like that right there. There's little guides right here to make sure that it's in position. And there's the key or the tooth, however you want to look at that. And what we'll do next is we'll get some sealant and put that down right there in the corners where the rubber seal meets the gasket that goes to the heads. Okay, so I painted up some of the intake there, and that's what it looks like. And I'm going to go ahead and be putting the front cover and water pump on next. So let's get to that. And also have the oil pan nice and cleaned out, though you might get something black on your fingers. There's no residue of that oil in there, and what I did is I just dumped all the detergent I was using to clean these parts into the oil pan, and it cleaned it up, and unfortunately exposed some rust. But anyway, okay, here I went ahead and used some contact cement to secure the lower manifold gasket. And what I used here is this yellow tube of Seal-All contact cement. You just put a little dab on what you're going to be gluing it to, and then also on what you are gluing, and wait 1 to 2 minutes and then slap it together. Now I held it on there for at least a minute before I let go of it so that it would be mounted nice and flush. Now here on these gaskets you got these little nibs or feet or whatever in the world these little things are, but anyway, they'll guide you how to sit that right down in there. And the instructions say that at both corners of this you're going to need to use some black RTV, and the same for this side here. There's no nibs, but it's got, you know, it's got a little guide on the sides there to make sure that you don't put it in the wrong spot. Don't force it or cut or modify. It can only go in that way. For front cover reinstallation, what you need to do is, here's your gasket. Make sure that you're not putting this on wrong. I think on the gaskets, as long as the numbers are facing where you can see them outward, that you have the thing in the right place. Make sure and use the locator dowels to center it up. If you put it on here backwards, it will appear that it'll work, but I assure you, it sure will not. Oh yeah? So, if you need to use something to tack that down, you can. Just make sure not to use any RTV, because if you really put much on there, you're just going to cause it to split the seal. So anyway, once you have that on, then let's get the front cover. Thing to do before you put your front cover on is make sure you take you some grease. Get you a little bit of grease and make sure to put that around the crank there. Now you want to put just a little bit on the timing chain for the fun of it. Since it's been open for a couple of days. But I take my nice and clean and assembled front cover with water pump. Just be careful not to beat it up. And what I just did is I got it caught on my seal, so you want to make sure to do that. That'll help you a long way if you just get everything wadded up and not in place. In fact, watch real close because your gasket will try and jump off of there with you just like it did right here. Guess it would have helped better if I'd had this thing turned around. But once you're on the locating dowels, then it's all downhill for you there. I'm going to pull mine back to make sure that my gasket's where it's supposed to be, because I am so paranoid about that. But when it's on the locator dowel, you should be able to just let go of it. I'm going to check it from the bottom and make sure that, oh yeah, I can see the gasket's in place good and everything. So now it's time to put all those different sized bolts back in. And this is where my video might be helpful to you in case you didn't mark it down. So let me get a better camera angle on this, and we'll put these bolts in. Also, here's what I did with the majority of the bolts out of the car, or at least the ones that didn't come out looking something like this or this, that is just clean. You know, 3/4 of them didn't. So what I did is I took a can of Idiot Spray, or brake cleaner rather, and held the can straight with the straw down in the jar here, and filled it up with the liquid it was spraying out, and that's awesome for cleaning up bolts. You can see in there, those bolts, well, if you knew what they looked like when they came out, I guess it's but anyway, I'm going to have to retrieve the bolts so we can get that front cover installed. Okay, I went ahead and I've already cleaned the rollers, but what I want to do is stick them down in some grease so that the engine isn't so dry when I fire up. Because we definitely want them to be already lubricated, not rubbing. I made sure to keep them in the orientation that they were already in. So now I'll have to just pull them out. Have a little grease on there. Make sure that it doesn't touch the gasket. Make sure that it doesn't touch the gasket. Make sure it doesn't get on my gloves and then touch the gasket either. And everything will be just fine. When this car starts up, there'll be some metal that's at least not rubbing on each other and be good and lubricated. Try not to use like a ton of grease or anything like that, but you can use engine oil or engine assembly lube, but if the parts are dry, put something on there to get them lubricated so there's not heavy wear. You want to make sure and get this engine valley just as clean as you possibly can, because you definitely don't want stuff like debris and metal shavings and trash going down into your engine to mess up the work you just did to your car. I mean, the situation where coolant and oil was mixing, you know, you're definitely going to want it to have as much lubrication as possible, because that was definitely a little hard on it. So I'm going to clean up the keepers real quick and then replace those so we can get on with putting the lower intake manifold on the thing. Okay, here's one of those keepers for the rollers. Just be careful you don't gouge your gasket or anything crazy with it. Make sure that you can see where it spells out up on it. And these will make sure that your rollers are lined up perfectly straight with the cam below. Let's see if I can try and get you a better shot of what I'm up to over here. Probably better if I got that pesky engine harness out of the way. You can probably see a whole lot more. Okay, here you go. You might be able to see this a little bit better. Just align it with the roller that's sticking up the farthest, and then down to the smaller one. Get the hair off of it. I mean, it's that easy. There's just going to be two that's going to be hard to get to at the gasket. Just be patient with it. And as you can see, make sure that it says up there on the top. Alright, here's one where you're obviously going to have fun with the gasket. So what I would do is turn this roller like that until you can get it over there. And onto the other side. Make sure that you've got these pointed upward like it says. See, now usually I would say do the bigger one first, but or the one that's stuck up the farthest rather. In this case, we'll do the smaller one. And the final one there, that one was ultra simple. What I want to do is take a little grease, put it there in the center of the roller where the push rod comes in, so they're nice and lubricated when it goes back to work. Nothing worse for a vehicle than a dry start. So and yeah, you can use motor oil if you want to, but using grease, it's going to stay there until it starts running. So I mean, if you're just hurrying it up and getting it together, then motor oil will be fine. But this is why I use grease, because a lot of times on a job I just take my little sweet time and I don't have to worry if the oil has ran off of parts that I've assembled or any of that kind of thing, because I use grease unless there's a reason that I can't. So there we go, we got those guys. So now for the hold down. And that's an 8mm. And before, I'm going to also tighten those bolts down, but before I get started, I'm going to wipe the gasket down and make sure they don't have any kind of grease or that kind of crap on it. Okay, so getting ready to set the intake down on there, and got two different little rubber pieces, kind of an S shape or whatever, but the manual says that you need to lay down some black RTV here in the corners of this thing. I also made sure that the surface here was already clean, free of oil or any of that kind of crap. Took a rag with some brake cleaner on it and wiped this. So it's supposed to have RTV there in the four corners where everything meets together. I love using these cans of it instead of the tubes of it. Then you got one of these on the other side here. Just technically the back of the block, but and the ribs or edges or whatever you want to call it on the sides of these things, if you look real close, you shouldn't be getting it wrong. If it doesn't fit right, it's because it's not on right. This one doesn't have any of the little nibs or teeth or whatever like the other one did. So you just make sure that you put it on there like you're supposed to. Now, after using the Permatex stuff that I'm using here, I'm using the Ultra Black number 85080. It says to immediately assemble the parts after applying this stuff, so make sure and do that as soon as you have applied that. And just had about forgot, need to tighten down the rocker hold downs. I mean the roller hold downs. So make sure nothing's in your way so that you can put your intake on with. So that you can put your intake on, sorry. Make sure there's no debris on the underneath side of it, that it's clean. You don't want to have any kind of mistakes or anything at this point, because you'll just have to do it again. Be careful of what all you have to work around. Just do your best to get it into place. Sorry, I actually didn't know that the camera was zoomed out on that. My bad. But anyway, set this thing down. Get your Torx 50. Bolts are going. There shouldn't be any trouble getting these in by hand. If there is trouble getting them in by hand, something's wrong. I mean, you can look and tell whether or not the actual gasket's in place or not. And on this one here, you're going to have a torque wrench. There's two torque sequences to get these fellers on here. And the first sequence is 11 foot-pounds, and the second sequence is 24 foot-pounds. I just went and bought a brand new torque wrench just for this little project we're doing right now. So I mean, this is one part you're going to want to make sure that your bolts that you're putting in there is free of rust and junk like that, because you definitely don't want to not get these torqued down right. So anyway, I appreciate all of you that watch my channel, my videos, and those of you that chat back and forth with me. Thank you. I want to take a moment and praise my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for all the mercy and grace that He's shown me and my family. And if you don't know Him, I pray that you do meet Him. You can read about Him in the King James Bible, and you can check out on my website at sharingthetruthandlove.com and click on the Salvation tab. Have the gospel outlined as to who Jesus Christ is and what He did to save you, and how you can be saved by grace through faith alone and no works of yourselves. So anyway, my friends and viewers, thank you again, and praise our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Have a great rest of your weekend.